guys, it's Thorn, and I took my hoodie off to trick you into thinking that it was a different day, and I'm not just making a string of videos. Um, so, it's now week 27, 10 minutes later, and the YouTube Pagan Challenge is, do you use chants, mantras, affirmations? I almost skipped this one because I didn't really think I'd have a lot to say, because the short answer is no. So that's well, hang on. These are all really different things. Like I'm actually kind of struck that they're in the same question, just because I could see putting mantras and affirmations in the same question, but chanting might function the same way. But well, let me just shut up for a second and just talk about what I do about that. So yes to chanting. Okay. I think that sound can be a really important magical trigger. It's one of my biggest ones. I use music and sound and chanting all the time. I think that there's a lot to be said for like nonsensical chanting. I think people spend a lot of time writing like complex poetic chants, but when it comes right down to it for me, a lot of it is just the actual vibration of the sound itself, rather than the words being spoken. And that's, I don't know if it's just because I'm a musician or what, but music has always been a really big magical trigger for me. And if it's music that I'm making with my own mouth, that is the biggest of all. Right? That was pretty awkward. So yeah, chanting, definitely. A lot of the time it's on the fly, right? Like if I sit down and try to write something, I'm just going to forget it later. Or when it actually comes to the heat of the moment, I'm going to realize that like my meter was off and it just doesn't really work if I try to do it in a round or something with other people, or that's not something I'm great at. Okay. But if it's just like the core intention of a spell, or it's some word of power or something, and it's just like from your guts, right? Like that's when it becomes powerful and useful, and that's one of the things that kind of snaps my brain into place where it needs to be. So yes, absolutely to chanting, and it's like it's a different sensation than playing music, although. So with chanting, one of the things to me that's so powerful about it is that when you're really like, when you're like engaging your diaphragm and it really is like coming from inside like that, your body vibrates, like your head vibrates, like you like the sound is literally moving through you, which is really cool. It's I think you could probably achieve something similar by playing music particularly loud. Like if like something that just maybe something that had a really heavy bass or something, like your body shakes. If you had that experience in traffic where another car goes by and they've got like subwoofers or something and your car starts to shake, right? Like you're being physically assaulted by somebody else's music. It's kind of that feeling, but in a good way, right? That is really, really great for magical working. So that's something that I like to incorporate whenever I can. And you can combine it too, or like you can play, I like to play like trancey music. There's another question here in a few weeks about pagan music, and I kind of want to talk about it now, but I don't want to just totally digress. But short thing is, I really don't like pagan music, and I don't listen to it very much. As we narrowly define pagan music, when I'm in ritual with myself and I'm using music, I am usually playing some kind of like, I like metal, right? I like trance. I like, I've used dubstep, right? Like I like heavy kind of driving, usually non-vocal, but it kind of depends, obviously on what's going on with the lyrics, or whether or not I can understand the lyrics, right? Like, like that's what I'll turn to, and stuff like that, especially when there aren't words, or when the words that are being sung, they're not in your language, or you can't understand them or something. So it's easy to kind of superimpose your own sounds over top. That to me is really, really effective, and that's what I go for when I use music in ritual. And that's, to me, like that's chanting, right? Like you're creating this kind of repetitive, like, mind trigger where you're pouring everything into this thing, and it's complementing your magical task. And you can use the sound again as a trigger later if you kind of want to reactivate things, right? Like if you're singing to yourself later, or if you're doing subsequent rituals and you're calling on that same kind of sound. It's just like how when you hear your favorite song, like coming over the radio at a coffee shop or something, it can take you back. You can have, you start reminiscing and you can't help it. Magical sounds work the same way. If you hear them again, it triggers a lot of that old kind of energy. And if you do that in a conscious way, right, like that's a way to build power. So yes to chanting, all the chanting. Mantras and affirmations are different things in my mind. I'm actually not super confident in saying that I really understand mantras. So I'm not gonna, like, the way I think people understand mantras for the most part is a mantra is a meaningful phrase or a set of words that you repeat to yourself in order to trigger change, right? And people talk about their personal mantras, and often when people talk about personal mantras, they're talking about some kind of phrase that maybe they write it in their bullet journal, right? And they look at it every day and it inspires them or something. I think that might actually be a slightly different thing. But this idea of a mantra being your personal saying that kind of guides your life, that's not something that I do or something that I have. I don't know. Same with affirmations. When I was a teenager and I was really getting interested in religion generally and Wicca specifically, like affirmations, kind of like with the meditation thing I was just talking about, like everybody had, told you had to have affirmations, right? Like Silver Ravenwolf was all about affirmations, and a lot of the other folks writing in the 90s were too. And now you really don't see it so much in witch books, I think, anymore. You see it in New Age material where it's always been, right? But the idea behind an affirmation is that you speak. It's a positive statement, and it's basically faking it until you make it, right? Like if you say the thing aloud to yourself as though it is already true, and it subsequently becomes true, right? So if I don't know, like if I wanted to become a really amazing runner or something, I wouldn't speak in terms of I am going to become or I am going to do. I would wake up and I would look at myself in the mirror and gaze into my eyes and I would say, I am an amazing runner, right? And that would trigger something in my brain subtly so that I believed it and it would subsequently become true. Like that's my understanding of affirmations, okay? And I guess they really work for some people. And that's cool. Again, as with all things, if it works for you and it makes your life better, then by all means, okay? For me, I don't know, like, it's not something I put a lot of stock in. And it's not something that I don't mean this the way it sounds. It's not something that I feel like I've ever really needed. Like, just the nature of my personality, I'm a very determined person, and I've also failed a whole lot. Like, I've done a lot of, like, I'm 32, okay, and I feel like I've had a lot of short lives, okay? Like, I had a lot of false starts in career and in school and in relationships and whatever, and I feel like I've already failed a whole lot. Like, things have not worked out the way I ever anticipated. I thought I was going to do one thing and it was going to be my life, and I failed, right? And I've had relationships that went on for years, right? And I thought I was going to marry the dude and we were going to blah, 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 and it failed, right? Like, and that's fine. Like, it's actually awesome and perfect looking back on it, okay? But in failing so much, like, failure became okay. because I got to see that like things could be really horrific and awful. I mean, I've had points in my life where like I don't like I was in an abusive relationship for several years, and it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And now like bad things happen, and I think like, what is this going to do that I haven't already experienced? Like what, what, I don't know. Like I just don't get as anxious anymore. Because I've already been in a position where I've wanted to die, right? So like, you know what? If I do poorly on this thing, or if it doesn't work out, or I don't get this job, or this person hates me, or whatever, like I might be upset for a while, but like, hey, at least it's not 2007, or whatever. So affirmations, like that's great, but I'm at this point in my life, I'm really much more of like just a push through and do it kind of person. Like be scared or whatever, but do the thing anyway. And I don't know, like affirmations have always just made me feel, I don't know. Like I'm just gonna go out and try to do the thing and try to be the person I want to be, instead of telling myself that I already am. Because there's also that part inside of me that knows that I'm actually not. Like I'm not fooling myself. But I believe that I can be. Like I believe that I can do and have these things. But only if I stop gazing at my eyes in the mirror and I go out and I actually do them. So I don't know. I mean they're great, and if that's something that works for you, I think that's awesome. I know a lot of people who are really, really intent on mantras and affirmations, and that's awesome. Okay. But I don't even think I'm really that mentally engaged sometimes with what I do. I think I'm a lot more visceral in some ways, and I don't always think things through. I just go and I do it, and I hope that it works out. And no amount of like mental preparation is going to necessarily stop me or further encourage me to do the thing. Like my guts have already decided, and now my body is going to follow through, and at some point my brain will catch up. So, which is probably why I've failed so much. But there. Okay. Maybe I'll go put on a different shirt this time and do more videos.